Welcome everyone to Feasibility of Growing Saffron to Enhance Farm Profitability and Sustainability with Masoud Hashemi and Leila Tabrisi. Today, as we get started, I will go through a couple of slides. We are using this map to remind all of us who work with the land to acknowledge the history of use, dating back centuries before colonization by Europeans, with the indigenous land management practices that were going on, become familiar with the people who lived on the land where you live now, are currently occupying. This is a great resource, nativelands.ca. You can click through links and learn more about the current structures and organizations that are in your area. As well, we want to make sure to remind everyone that during the presentation, please remain on mute to maintain the sound quality for everybody. During parts of the presentation, we may ask you to come off of mute to speak and share. Just remember to click that microphone button and go back on mute when you're done speaking. At any point, if you have questions, you are welcome to use the chat feature to put those in. And then during some portions of the event where we'll take questions, we can bring those back up. And please note that this session is being recorded. We, of course, want to thank all of our sponsors who help make this event possible. When you are out and about and you see these names, please remember to say how much you appreciate their support of UMass. As well, we have a great online auction with many of our vendors and sponsors offering items in this awesome auction. So, as they say, check in, put your bids in early and often, and make sure you get those things that you're looking for. We, of course, encourage you to spend some time with in our vendors room and talking to our virtual vendors who are doing some very innovative work, and learn more about their work and their products. That's all I have for now. We're a small group. I think it'd be a great opportunity for us to all introduce ourselves. I'm Doug Cook. I'm UMass Education Events Coordinator. I work, primarily coordinating these types of events. So I'm helping out here. I'm on the northeast side of what is now Massachusetts, in the town now known as South Hamilton. Oh, you're muted if you'd like to begin, Masoud.
Who's next?
You're next, Masoud.
I am. Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. This is Masoud Hashemi. I'm Extension Professor at UMass. And today I will present this talk about saffron, along with two of my co-presenters. Arthur Siller is my PhD student, and also Dr. Leila Tabrisi, which is actually working in my lab as a postdoc. And with that, I let other people introduce themselves.
Yeah. Feel free to come off mute, share your video if you'd like to say hello, or if you'd just like to say hello in the chat. Anything's welcome. We are interested to hear more about you all, to hear your interests and that sort of thing. Arthur, would you like to take a moment to say hello? All right. Casey mentioned in the chat that they're getting ready to plant a few hundred saffron crocus in upstate New York. That's interesting. Great. All right, Masoud, I think we can get the presentation underway. You're welcome to share the screen when you're ready.
Okay, hello again. So today we're talking about saffron, whether we can grow it in Massachusetts or in Northeast or not. And if we can, what are the most important topics about the growing saffron? We're talking, my co-presenters are Dr. Leila Tabrisi, and also Arthur Siller, which is a PhD in my lab. So after this presentation, if you want to contact me with any questions that you may have, you can use Masoud at umass.edu. Okay, with that, so the very first thing that I would like to share with you is that most of us, if not all, we are familiar with crocus, right? And it's a very beautiful bulbous plant, and probably one of the earliest flower that we can see in the spring, early spring. And then the question is, what is the difference between crocus and the saffron? Well, there are many similarities. Both of them belong to the same family. If you look at their leaves, the leaves are exactly the same. The color of the flower is kind of similar. We don't have much variation in color of saffron as we can see in crocus, but both of them are bulbous. So there are so many common features about these two. However, there are some major differences, and I would like to talk about those major differences. One of the differences between these two is this stigma, or as you can see on the left side, we don't have that kind of a stigma in crocus, whereas that stigma is what we call it saffron. Okay, so if you look, so after harvest, this is what we are going to have. And so this is the major difference between these two. The second major difference is the time of flowering or time of blooming. As I just said, the crocus usually in the early spring, whereas in saffron usually blooms in sometime in mid-October all the way to mid-November, depends on if you are located on the hillside, on the elevated areas, or you're closer to the coast, that sort of things. But it's roughly anywhere between the mid-October to mid-November. So yeah, this is the picture of a flower. And the other difference between saffron and crocus is that many saffron plants do not produce leaves until they produce flower. Now, there are some variations, there are some varieties of saffron, or there are some areas that the leaf and the flower, they grow together. But mostly in the major areas of saffron production, the very first thing that you can see is the flower, and then after the leaves start growing. Okay. So this picture shows a saffron field. As you can see, there is no leaves. There is a bouquet of the flowers, as you can see. So yes, the very first year, maybe you get only one or maybe two flowers from each corn that you planted. But after in the second year or the third year, because they produced daughter corms, so each daughter corm produces flowers. So all of a sudden you see that there is a bouquet per plant. And the more, of course, the more flowers that you have, the more productive the system is, and the more money comes out of that. So this is a safflower in Massachusetts. As you can see, the leaves and flowers are growing together. It's totally different than the picture above. Okay. Once the flowers are picked or dyed, this is the picture of the field. As you can see, the leaves are very dark green, and as you can see in the background, it's late fall, and therefore, as you can see in late fall, the leaves are very healthy, they're growing, and but no flowers, of course. So let's talk about a little bit statistics. Globally, there are the production, total production globally is 418 tons per year, and that occupies roughly about 300,000 acres. This is the world map, as you can see, the areas with the dark green, dark red or maroon are the major areas of production. So you can see that in somewhere around Nepal and in part of the Iran and part of the Spain. But the one with the red is also very, very, the areas that they grow saffron currently, and the pink shows that they just started to growing saffron. Okay, from China to Southern California, to Southern American countries. Now, this picture shows that even Iran, which is 94% of the saffron is coming from, not the whole country is considered as a major production, only that section. So that by itself shows that production of saffron requires a specific climate, a specific soil for maximum productivity. However, in other areas, they may not have maximum productivity, but still they can be grown economically wise, economically sound system, okay? As you can see, these yellow areas are the areas that just most recently started to grow saffron in a large acreage from New Zealand, Australia, China, part of the Africa, and also many countries in Southern America. Okay. Now the question is, can you grow saffron in New England? Well, the answer, of course, is yes. Okay, I give you a couple of history about the growing saffron in New England. So as it shows, the leaves are with the ice and snow on top, and they survive beautifully. So that picture shows they can tolerate even harsh winters in zone 5 or even 4. Dr. Margaret Skinner and Arash Arash is a PhD working with Margaret. They are in the University of Vermont. They have done very significant research in Vermont, and they grew saffron. First, they grew saffron in the greenhouse and high tunnel, and then they started growing it in the field, and it's been very successful. And actually, just a few months ago, probably 3 months ago, they had their annual conference, and I was there, and I noticed that there were 170 people participated in that conference. Okay, in Rhode Island, Dr. Gesh and also Dr. Brown are working on saffron, and they produce it very successfully. And these are some of the pictures from Rhode Island. In Maine, there are some farms, including White Duck Farm, that they're growing commercially, they're growing saffron. In Massachusetts, we just started with joining Dr. Tabrizi to our research. We just started to grow saffron. And as you can see, I'm just showing this to emphasize that saffron is really attractive to the pollinators, and it blooms when other crops really do not have flowers. So that would be a nice feature of the saffron. So at the end, so the outcome of what I just said is that yes, it is possible to grow saffron, and hopefully at the end of this talk, we will offer some systems to produce saffron that is more economically sound. So the saffron as we know it is really nothing but the dried stigma of the saffron flower, okay? And so it's not the whole flower, it's just a very little part of the flower. And it has that saffron stigma, has a lot of applications. It can be used in food and beverages. Let me just tell you, for some of you already know, but for those of you who don't know, what they do, they have very small food processor. They actually, what they do, they grind saffron just a little bit. They grind it, and then they actually they add hot water. They make a solution, saffron solution, and they keep it in the fridge. And then every time they want to use it for any food, any type of the food, what they do, they add a few drops of that solution, which is concentrated solution, and they kept it in the fridge. So that's how they use it. Okay. So it can be used for to add flavor or color to the food, what that might be, whatever that might be. It also has many usage in pharmaceutical and cosmetic industries, okay? And also it is a very, very important medicinal plant, and it's been used for all kinds of diseases, including Alzheimer's, Parkinson, depression, and many, many, many others. Okay, there's a long list of diseases that saffron is used to either cure or to reduce the severity of that issue. So there are some major advantages to growing saffron, okay? And the very first one, I would say at the top of the list of the advantages of saffron is that its cultivation and harvest usually coincides with the time that farmers don't have much to do. They already planted it if they want it, and they harvested it, whatever they grew during the summer and early fall. And probably the only one that is going to be planted it when saffron needs to be planted or harvested it is garlic. And we know that in New England, usually we planted the garlic sometime in early October to late October, right? So that's the only crop that coincides with the saffron plantation. However, one thing that I need to emphasize again, that saffron is not just the annual plant, it's a perennial. So once you planted it 1 year, you're good to go for several years, right? But the harvesting is another story. So that's I would consider this as a major advantage, because it needs attention when the growers have nothing else to do, or they have little things to do. Other advantages is that it can be grown in marginal land. Now, it doesn't mean I'm recommending to grow it in a marginal land, but it can tolerate marginal land because it requires just a very minor fertility. And of course, if the land has high organic matter, that's even better. The productivity goes up, and but it doesn't really require a very fertile soil in order to be able to grow saffron. The other is, as I just said, it requires just a minor amount of fertilizer, and this is simply because the leaves are not really there all the time. The leaves are there only for a few months, and as I showed you before, and I will show you again, the leaves are very narrow, and they really don't grow much. So the fertilizer requirement is minimal. The other good thing is that it doesn't require any irrigation, because there is no plant between the May and October. There is no even not residues of the saffron is on the soil. So and usually we irrigate plants during the summer, and saffron is not there during the summer. So no irrigation is required. That makes it very attractive. And the other thing is there is no serious pest or diseases, okay? And probably the only exception would be rodents, and that is true for any root crop. Some farms have that issue, some farms don't have it. So that could be problematic if the grower is really experiencing some rodent issues in the farm. The other advantage of the saffron is that because it's not growing during the summer, therefore it can be intercropped with other crops during the summer. And that's another attractive feature of the saffron. So just a little bit about the botany of the saffron for those of you who are not well familiar with this crop. First of all, it grows from corn. These are corn, like garlic. The only difference between corn of saffron and garlic is that it doesn't have, it's just one corn, okay? It's unlike garlic that you can separate and the cloves and then you can plant it. You cannot cut it or you cannot really split it. So each plant comes from one corn, okay? The second feature of the botany is that, as I mentioned several times, the leaves are like grass type leaves, very dark green, narrow, and the roots are pretty much the same as garlic. And as you can see here, the corn, the one that you planted it now, it produces daughter corms. So each corn can produce several. And remember, each daughter corn can produce leaves and therefore can produce one or more flowers. And before you know it, the corn that you planted, it produces like a bouquet of the flowers, okay? And for those of you, again, that haven't seen safflower, this is the corn with a relatively shallow root, and then there is no stem the way that we know it. Yes, there are something that we call it a stem, but that is actually extension of the flower that goes all the way to the corn, okay? And when you harvest the flower, you're harvesting the stem with it, okay? And so this is the flower, and we're talking about flower more in a minute. So the corn, again, the specific about the corn, the proper weight of the corn is something like 8 grams. I mean, that's the minimum that you want it. The larger, the better. But also remember that the larger the corn, the more expensive the corn. So if you buy it, I mean, it's totally up to you to buy smaller ones and pay less, or purchasing larger ones but pay more. The diameter is more than 9 or 10 centimeters, and the price is really different. It could be anywhere between roughly about 20 cents to 35 cents. Again, based on if they are organic or not, and also if they are large or small. What I can suggest is that always use, remember, it's a perennial, so always use the healthy and uniform corms. The uniformity of the corm is very important. Doesn't matter if you're using small or large, as long as you plant uniform corms, that gives you uniformity in flowering and blooming and make harvest easier. So here is a very, as you can see, as I said, the flowers can be the very first part of the plant that comes out of the soil, or in this case, at least in Massachusetts or other states of the New England, we notice that the flowers comes with the leaves at the same time. The leaves, as you can see, and then after harvest, this is what it looks like, okay? So here's the life cycle. It starts with the corn, and then the corn starts to sprout, and sometimes so if this is your first year, for instance, you planted it sometime anywhere between July and August, and then in September or late September, October, it starts to sprouting. And in this case, the leaves comes first, but as I said, in many cases, flower come first, then it starts blooming. And here's the full bloom, okay? And again, after the harvest. And now, once the leaves, they continue growing and continue doing photosynthesis during the late fall and early spring, but usually they die roughly toward the end of the May, or in hotter areas, probably in next to the coast, probably even early May. Okay, once they die, they leave nothing. That residue can be blown away by wind, so there is nothing really in the soil. And that's the case anywhere between May all the way to October when they start growing. So for a long period of time, during the month of May, June, July, August, and September, you see nothing. And that could be, take advantage of that and we can grow something else. So let me see if I can move this. Yeah. Okay, so some important cultivation practices. Planting for the very first year, as I said, it's a perennial. So for the very first time, you can plant the corms anywhere between July to mid-September. I was told by Dr. Leila Tabrizi that the sooner that you can plant it, the better. But if for any reason the corm is not ready to be planted, to be shipped, you can still grow it successfully up until mid-September. The depth is anywhere between 6 to 8 inches. And now we prefer, we had an experiment, a preliminary experiment here at Massachusetts at the UMass Research Farm. We found that 8 inches is a good depth. You can plant it shallower, but especially if you remember that if you are going to grow something on safflower, saffron field, the deeper, which is 8, would be more favorable than shallow. Okay. Now the planting pattern is totally different. We recommend anywhere between 6 by 6 inches in all directions, 6 inches or 6 by 4. Remember, 6 by 4 gives you a higher population. So if you are really into producing saffron as a crop, then probably you want to use like 6 by 4, which gives you higher population and therefore higher flowers. Okay, now, is there any major issues that we need to mention? Yes, probably one of the major issues is the weed. Okay, the weed, remember, just don't forget that first of all, saffron is not really a great competitor in the first place. And especially when it dies, or we think it died, between May until bloom, all kinds of weeds will show up. And then you have to deal with the weeds. And there are not really many options to control the weed. You cannot cultivate because you already have corms in the soil, and many of you don't even want to disturb the soil. We're not going to use any herbicides or anything like that, so the options are really limited. Now, that I've seen or I've heard that people are using different strategies for controlling. We'll talk about it. The other major issue with the saffron is really is a labor intensive. Okay, it requires a lot of labor for harvesting, and also after harvesting to process the flower. So it really requires, it's a family business really, okay? And as you can see, there are several people are harvesting flowers in this field. Anything else? Well, I just mentioned rodent could be, at least in some farms, could be an issue. Rodents love corn, and it doesn't matter if it's saffron corn or any other root crops. So these are, I'm going to talk about a few potential strategies for controlling weeds. Use of mulch, whether it's a paper, plastic, straw, wood chips, whether it's very efficient or not, I leave it to you, because don't forget that you have to replace all of these basically annually, or at least every other year. So that makes it a little bit, and remember, because each corn produces daughter corns, and the daughter corns produce new flowers. Therefore, the use of paper mulch or plastic mulch may not really, it might be okay for the first year, but probably not very handy for the consecutive years. What else? The other thing that I personally or Dr. Tabrizi haven't experienced it, but that's on the top of the priority list of research that we have, is use of solarization. It actually works, I think it works very efficiently in saffron production, and you are almost all of you are familiar with the solarization. You cover the beds of saffron with the whether clear plastic or dark plastic, and because of the very high temperatures, then it kills all kinds of weeds. And so that could be a very good strategy. But if you're using solarization, then probably the downside would be we cannot grow something else that we are going to talk about it. Or you can grow one crop, a short season crop, and then after that you can use the solarization to control the weeds before the flowers are show up. The other way that again we are looking into it is the use of cover crops on the beds of the saffron to cover the soil, not only to prevent the weeds coming out, but also to make the soil healthier and prevent the soil erosion and all the benefits that you already know that comes with the cover crops. So those are some of the strategies that I can think of for controlling the weeds. Just to give you a very short information, we try to use living mulch, and for the living mulch, we used what we call it miniature clover, the clover that you can see it in the lawn, right? In the lawn, and they're coming. And so we use those things, and it worked okay, not perfectly, as you can see. And this is the area that with no mulch, okay? And we can see all kinds of weeds. And this is the area that is covered with the miniature clover. Now, we don't know, and I'm not going to recommend that to everybody who's growing saffron at this point, because that was just 1 year, and hopefully we can continue that research. But so far, as you can see, that these are the leaves of the saffron that growing in the miniature clover. And as you know, the clover is fixing nitrogen, so that could be another, in addition to controlling the weed, it can also add nitrogen to the soil. Again, this is at the research stage. I have no recommendation at this point. So in terms of flowering, the total flowering period is almost usually a month. So anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. And the harvest time is, as I said several times, it starts around mid-October and continues until mid-November. And so according to Dr. Tabrizi, you don't want to harvest the flower which is just like this size. It's not opened, and therefore it's not easy to separate, and the stigma takes more time. And also, according to her, and this is not also very proper when you have a full bloom like this. So the best time to harvest the flower would be at this stage in the middle. However, it happens, as you can see, this lady is harvesting at this stage, but chances are that you cannot harvest all the flowers at this stage, and you may end up with harvesting flowers at this stage, okay? So a very beautiful saffron that the leaves still is not there. Now, not having leaves is a plus, because it makes harvesting very easier compared with those varieties or the climate conditions that leaves and flowers are growing at the same time. Okay, this picture is from saffron field in Iran, and as you can see, there is no leaves. It makes it much easier. So then how about processing after the harvest? So remember that the shelf life of flowers is very short. It's only 3 to 4 days. You cannot harvest it and just leave it out there until you're finishing the harvest. So probably the same day that you harvest, the processing should start right away. Okay, and again, based on the experience by Dr. Leila Tabrizi, we better keep the harvested flowers in baskets with proper aeration, okay, something like this. She doesn't recommend any plastic containers or something for collecting the flowers. And so once the flowers have been picked and harvested it, then what they need to do, there are other groups of people who separating the stigma, and as I said, it comes with the long, what some people call it a stem, but that's part of the flower as well. So this is this is the section that you actually separating from the flower. Now, then the question is, does flower has any use? Well, according to Dr. Tabrizi, probably the only use for the flower, and that needs required more research, but at this point, they use it for coloring and that sort of thing. And so we need to think about other usage for the flower, because it would be such a wasteful thing, okay? Once you've separated it, it needs to be dried, and then should be kept in a container like this, with dried and in a cool and good storage condition. Okay, now I have to move this thing to see how what is the title of the slide. Yeah, so about the economics. Now, just to give you a hint, roughly 200 flowers produces 1 gram saffron, which is, we call it saffron, is a dried stigma, okay? And what is the market value? Well, it's really, really variable. The market price roughly is about $30 to $50 per gram. But remember, if you go to Costco or some other wholesale stores, you probably will find it even cheaper than that. But there is always a market for organic and the local grown saffron, and so they pay top-notch money for that kind of saffron. The other thing that I need to mention is that, as I just mentioned, the mother corn produces a lot of the other corns, okay? and maybe you don't want to harvest the corms for maybe 2 or 3 years, but after 2 or 3 years, you need to dig out, because each corm can produces up to 8 secondary or daughter corms. You don't want to leave that there. You can dig it out, and you can use it to expand the production, or you can sell it. Okay, so that's another source of income. As I said, each corn will be sold somewhere around 20-25 cents. Okay, each. Okay, with that, the flowers, as I said, there is not really much use at this point, but hopefully one day, if it becomes more popular and more common in United States, then I'm sure that they will find a use for a huge volume of the flowers. There are all kinds of recipes. These are not our recipes, but you know, it's very common in rice. Using it rice could be with the fish or some other things. This is a pasta, and this is ice cream or popsicle. This one is some Iranian recipes. As you can see, this is kind of baklava, and also this is the pudding. This is the probably one of the best ice cream in the world. The ice cream that is made or mixed with the saffron. It's a yellowish, and it tastes really, smells and tastes very, very beautifully. As I said, it's always used with the rice, all kinds of rice. And so this, the very last one is the rice and barberry. Some of you probably have never even tried barberry, but it's a very common, like a raisin, is used in a lot of. One of the things that Dr. Leila Tabrizi intends to do is to come up with a booklet for all kinds of collecting all the recipes, and hopefully that while she's here, she will publish that. Now, the last section of this talk is how we can integrate saffron into existing vegetable system, okay? Because a lot of growers, I'm sure a lot of growers hesitate to start something new, to get rid of whatever they're growing and replace it with saffron. That's not going to happen, and I'm not going to recommend that, okay? Now, what I recommend is that, okay, let's suppose that you're a vegetable grower, you're growing all kinds of vegetables, including eggplant or tomatoes or many other vegetables. So what we suggest that, what if you can replace maybe 1 or 2 strips or beds of whatever vegetable you're growing with saffron, okay? So now you have 1 or 2 strips of saffron, and that's what you can start with. Now, you may say, wait a second, these are not growing at the same time, usually the things like cucumber or eggplant or tomatoes, they usually, they're growing during the summer, and by September, they're gone, okay? They're gone. Whereas, as you just said, the saffron usually starts blooming and ready to be harvested sometime in October. So how you can replace those beds with this, and during the summer, what you're going to do during the summer? That's the point. That's a very nice point. So what we suggest that on the beds or on the strips of the saffron, because you don't see anything, no residues at all, it's just a bare soil during the month of May until late September. So we can grow something else, okay? We can grow anything that doesn't have deep root system, okay? Anything like beets or cilantro or parsley. In Rhode Island, they used basil, and very successfully. Could be scallion, or it could be anything, okay? Those are just a few examples. It could be anything that doesn't have really deep root. Remember that you planted it, your corm about 8 inches down, and therefore, if your roots reaches that 8 inches, that's fine. Okay, it's not gonna disturb, or it's not gonna harm the corms. So a shallow root crop, like for instance, the other option that I didn't show this, is the other option would be like a green salads. And so you can plant green salads first you can harvest it a couple of times, and then you can replace it with one of these or anything that you may have. So you are able to grow two crops, anywhere between May and September. And then you can leave the residues, okay? And you can leave the residues after the harvest. You can leave the residues on the soil, and then the saffron starts blooming, and you can start, and that residues actually become part of the soil, and you can start harvesting the saffron. So that's what I suggest to anybody who wants to try growing saffron. Okay, with that, thank you very much. And I really appreciate it if, so here's the point. Dr. Tabrizi is intending to submit a mini grant to work on the saffron. And we hope that we are going to have a saffron field day, so you can come and you can look at how they look like in the real world, how to harvest and all of those things. But we would like to know, there is no obligation to anybody. We would like to know how many of you who listen to this talk are interested to learn more about saffron, and whether you are interested to come to the field day. So that would be really helpful to plan ahead of time, okay? So with that, thank you very much. And I and Dr. Tabrizi and Arthur, my co-presenters, are ready to answer questions if you have any. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That was very, very, very interesting. I have a whole list of questions myself, but I would like to open it up to the attendees. Casey, you put in a question to the chat. Would you like to come off of mute and ask that question yourself? I am happy to read it for you. Yeah, I'll go ahead and read that. It's Casey asked, what is the cold tolerance of the corms? And can they be brought indoors over winter in New England? Should they be brought indoors?
Well, the answer is you don't have to. I mean, if you want it, that would be extra labor cost, and that would be extra work to do, and you have to disturb the soil. Whereas you can just leave it there, and all of those examples that I show you in Rhode Island, Vermont, and Massachusetts, we didn't dig out the corms, and it was there, and it's there, and it continues blooming, unless you want to dig out the soil and separate the other corms for either expanding the production or to selling the corms.
Interesting. So that sort of leads to one question of, how long does a bed, would you say, last? You said several years. Would you have to replenish, or is it more of a process of extracting the corms and leaving some corms in place?
Well, I let Dr. Tabrizi. How long you leave it there?
For economic, it's 4 or 5.
Well, according to Leila, the economic life of the corms is about 4 to 5 years. So you want to dig out after 4 or 5 years. And again, as Dr. Tabrizi says, the other corms usually start growing on the top. And so as we go, after 4 years or 5 years, they are really close to the soil level. So you don't want that. And once the corm are very close to the soil level, they are subject to the freezing and other things.
So similar to that climate question, have you had any success in the South growing, perhaps in the Georgia area?
Well, uh, the answer is I have never tried it. I just started trying in Massachusetts. But if I, as I showed you in the world map, I can see there are several areas like in Southern America. There are a lot of those countries in the Southern America. They are probably close. They have close climate to Georgia as opposed to northern part of the United States. So I don't see any reason why not, unless they have some other things. Maybe the rodent could be a problem. What else?
California.
Yeah, and actually, she just mentioned a very good thing, and that so California is a major nowadays is a major area of growing saffron.
Hannah, I see you have your hand up. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Hi. Thanks for that presentation. That was great.
Thank you.
I'm wondering, for somebody who's new to the plant and doesn't really know it very well, what are some sort of like physical indicators or things that people should look for? Like if the leaves start to discolor or the flowers, are there any signs of the plant being healthier or not so healthy that you can look for?
Okay, one thing which I forgot, and thank you very much for mentioning that, is that like any other bulbous plants, they are not really friendly to clay soils. Okay, so before I forget, let me mention that. So that anything that holds the water for a longer period of time, like clay soil, or a soil that has a high percentage of clay, probably they are not really appropriate for any bulbous plant, including saffron. That is that. I don't think there is any major indication of failure, not growing well of saffron. But if you haven't started and you want to start it later, maybe it's a good idea to grow saffron in pots just to see how it grows. A lot of places, including all of these New England, they started in high tunnel or in the greenhouses, and once they were sure that it grows very well and it blooms, then they started to grow it in the field. So maybe if you have time and you are interested, that maybe you can start growing in the pots, a few, maybe 3 or 4 corms per pot, and to see how it grows. But I personally, and Dr. Tabrizi is here, and she confirms that we didn't see any major, anything that shows, failure of growing. So the leaves are always dark green, and because it doesn't have a pest or disease, there is no reason to see some issues with the leaves growing. And so I don't.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Similarly, I was curious to hear a little bit about the sort of native habitat of the crocus. The crocus. Does it tolerate any shade or compaction and things like that?
Compaction is kind of no, as I said. It actually acts like a clay soil, right? Compaction. So anything that prevents the blooming, fast blooming, and when the flowers out of the soil, anything like that is not really a good thing. In terms of the major area of the saffron production, they usually have, it's like a desert type of things. That means they have a cold temperature at night and sometimes very hot temperatures during the day. As I said, and usually the desert, they usually don't have a fertile soil, and that's good because the saffron doesn't need really a high fertility requirement, doesn't need any water, and that's another thing. I don't know if I answer your questions. Did I?
Yeah, and then sounds like it likes full sun, and maybe not. Or I know the crocus
yes,
we have
right. Back to the shade. I don't think the shade is the shade. She says that no shading. It should be full sun, full sun.
Great. Are there other questions from the audience? I can keep going. Another question I was thinking of, have you seen any particular varieties or species that are more locally adapted?
Well, not at this point, really. All of these areas that I just mentioned, all of the farmers that I know, all of those people who participated in the annual conference, they purchased their corn from Spanish based company that has a branch in Philadelphia. So all of the corns in this area are coming from that company. And that is good in terms of you don't have to purchase from outside and then quarantine and all of those downsides that comes with it. It's that they usually do it, and so they are in Philadelphia. So basically everything that I've heard of so far is coming from one company, and whether they have different varieties or not, it's something that people can ask directly. But I don't think, and Dr. Leila is also telling me that there is no variety, maybe in the future, but not now.
Yeah, sounds like room for growth. And several people are interested to hear more specifically where they might find sources for corms. Would you like to share that?
Yeah, there is a company, I hate to say this because that may sound like advertising, but because everybody buys corn from this company, so it seems that there is not really competition. So I can mention the name, the Rocco. The Rocco, so the Rocco Saffron. So if you type Rocco Saffron, ROCCO, Rocco Saffron, that would be, tells you the contact information.
Nashling is asking about using raised beds, perhaps starting small as an experiment. Do you know, what would you recommend for raised bed?
Well, probably it's me. I'm not very fond of raised bed, simply because remember, you need to have so many flowers in order to produce 1 gram. So I'm thinking of how economic would be to using raised bed for producing, as I said, 200 flowers produces 1 gram. And I mean, it's nice to have it for beauty or for, that sort of things. For economic wise, I don't recommend it.
Raised bed, just to experiment, like you mentioned, doing it in pots. But if we wanted to just, do it in a raised bed, would we have to dig them up at night? I mean, in the winter, rather.
Sorry, your voice was not really clear to me, so I don't know what the question was.
I'm sorry. If we planted them in a raised bed just as an experiment for.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, but it's pretty much the same as you grow it like in the pots, and just to see how it grows and whether it's something that you like to do. And if you do that, if you really planted it in raised bed, I would recommend to do whatever what I said at the end of my talk, and that is planted it about 8 inches deep, and then try to plant something on top sometime in like May or late May, and see how it grows. And how, for instance, try salad green, for instance, and harvested it a couple of times, and then see if that works for you. Okay.
Okay, would we have to dig, so we wouldn't have to dig them up in the winter, even though they're in a raised bed?
No, you don't.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure. Other questions?
I was interested to hear if you could describe a little bit more of that process. So we've harvested the flower, and we've opened it up to take the stamen out. That, are we like using tweezers, fingers? How does that work?
Yeah, people who do that, they're usually using the fingers. And hopefully, if we come up with this saffron field day, we can actually demonstrate it, how to harvest it, how to separate the stigma.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And how long does it take to dry once it's separated?
It doesn't need a whole lot of time, because it's just a stigma, and probably within it could be dried probably within 2 days at most. Yeah, so it dries very fast.
No. Other folks? I was also, when you were talking about interplanting, it got me thinking about other perennial species. Have you heard of any perennial interplanting or perennial intercropping systems? Perhaps strawberries or some other shallow rooted fruit?
Into it, I did not even think about it. If I just guess, I would say, as long as the residues of the strawberry is not really covers the land and prevents the blooming, that should be okay. So I don't know. What is the situation of the strawberry residues in your area. But if not really much residue, then why not?
Casey asked, will you do a field day this year?
Well, most likely, yes. There is no promise, because as I said, we hope with submitting a mini grants and getting a little bit money for purchasing corms and some other things, probably, but I'm thinking of why not? Yeah, we can do that.
All right.
Hopefully.
If would you like to collect emails? If folks are interested, how would you like to communicate with them?
That would be nice. I mean, that makes it much easier and handier if people send me their email either now or later, because as I mentioned, my email address is very straightforward. Is Masoud, M-A-S-O-U-D, my first name, @umass.edu. So if you prefer to send me your contact information by email, that's fine. If you just want to do it right now in the chat, that would be nice as well. But again, I really like to emphasize there is no obligation for you guys just by saying I'm interested to learn more about saffron or to attend the field day. That doesn't make any obligation to you.
Excellent. Well, I'm happy to hang out for a bit more. Do folks have some more questions you'd like to ask? Have you pondering anything? We are not required to use up the rest of the half hour. We can end a little early and folks can slip on into some other workshops if that's what you all prefer.
I actually have another question. I'm wondering sort of like the sociocultural, like how well it's being received in the academic community, as well as between different farmers. Are people excited by it or daunted, or it's gaining a lot of traction, or folks are steering clear? What's it like on a social level? Are you getting a lot of interest?
Well, not us, because as I said, Dr. Leila just joined my lab last year, okay, during the pandemic. And so we really didn't have much time to reach out to people, to Massachusetts community. But we had a chance to participate in Vermont annual conference. And as I said, it was like two months ago, and 170 people attended, and that shows that there is a growing in the interest of people who like to try it. And I'm sure that if we introduce saffron a little bit better in terms of the recipes, for instance, and also if we can attend more actively in the farmers markets and that sort of thing to introduce the crop, we can actually we can increase the interest. And as I said, by no means you can compete with the price of the saffron that is sold in Costco or some other wholesale markets. And but there is always, like any other crop, there is always demand for locally grown and especially organic saffron. And a lot of restaurants, they are really, if they know that it's a local and organic, they pay top-notch money for the saffron. And we need to introduce that to the restaurants, and once they use it, they're not going to stop using it. And so that's the case. So, but to answer your question, it seems that there is a huge interest. Some people are hesitant simply because it's a new crop. They never heard of it or they never tried it. But as soon as they start growing, in that, for instance, in that conference, in Vermont conference, there was a talk by the farmer who I really surprised to see that they started huge. They started with like half an acre. Now they are expanding to several acres. And I was thinking to myself, where in the world they get labor to harvest those? And because it's really labor intensive, but obviously it's working. Otherwise they wouldn't expand that much. And so, yeah.
And are the flowers edible? How do they taste?
The flower?
Flowers themselves, once we've harvested the stamen, could we?
I never tried. Have you tried?
What?
The flower, after you separate the stamen, the stigma, I should say,
Yeah, stigma.
stamen, the male is useless. Okay, male is useless, but the whole, the female also, as I said, not the whole thing is useful, just the stigma, and it has it has 3 branches. And so we just before this talk, we were discussing that what a waste that we're not using the flower after separating the stigma. And
Food industry or cosmetic
probably the food industry have use for it, because it causes, I mean, it produces color. It produces color, whether it's a purple or blue, and it's organic, and it's and also it's natural color, and I'm sure that there is use. Hopefully we are going to keep Layla for a longer period of time so she can start working on that part as well, using the flowers after separating stigma.
What are some of the research questions that you are wishing to pursue, like intercropping and other sorts of things like that? Or yeah, what's on your mind? What are you looking to dive into as a researcher?
As a researcher, I would like to grow it more economically. And when I say grow it more economically, that is a combination of population density, because the more population density translates into more flower harvesting, and that makes it more economic. So I would like to work on the rows spacing and the space between the plants. That is something that I like to tap into. Definitely, I would like to look into intercropping, which it's not really intercropping, because by definition, intercropping, when you say intercropping, at least a part of their growth is together, whereas that's not something that I'm thinking of. Is it like a triple crop, double cropping, triple cropping? That's something like that. I would like to do that. And I would like to do some budget enterprise to see, okay, once we replace a bed or a strip of, I'm just saying, tomatoes, for instance, and replace it with vegetable greens in summer and then saffron, how much money, considering all the labor costs, the purchasing the corn and everything, how economic would be, that's another area that I really like to tap into it. Other things is, as I said, that the weed. As I said, solarization is something that seems doable, but I really like to do it myself, and before I recommend it to anybody else. And so solarization is something that I like. So my idea is that you can grow something in early May, and then after harvesting, you can still using solarization for controlling weeds into the blooming saffron in October. So that's something that I'm interested in. But you just mentioned variety. I would like to explore a little bit more to see if there is other varieties that we can use. I don't know if there is any. Maybe there are some other sources of corns somewhere in the United States that we can ask. That's another area of research. This is not something that probably not many growers are interested in, but Leila had extensive research on contaminated soil, growing saffron in contaminated soil, just in case if there is any contaminated soil, like cadmium and that sort of thing, and lead, cadmium, and that sort of thing, and how to deal with the, so she used nanosulfur in order to mitigate that kind of problems. So she had extensive research in the greenhouse on that area, and soon, hopefully soon, she's going to publish the results of that. I don't know, but we are, as an extension person, we always open to any ideas, any request for research, anything that I can help with.
I have one more question. Thanks so much for answering.
Sure.
Do farmers use any machinery, or it's all by hand?
I have not heard anybody here or anywhere else using machinery. I never heard of any.
Wow. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, so who knows? I mean, Leila was telling me the other day that people are trying to using some kind of suction for harvesting flour. I don't know the result. I don't know how useful and how. Yeah, she says that they are working on it. So it's not in the market yet, but yeah, so suction. Suction methods could be comes to the rescue. It may really reduce the cost of the labor. Okay.
Yeah, well, that's excellent. I'm sure the research Leila's doing into contaminated soils would have a lot of interest among our urban growers, as that's often the consideration.
Okay.
So we'll look forward to that research coming out.
Yeah, so it's not just, as I said, it's not just how quality and productivity of saffron will be impacted by a polluted soil. That's part of her research, but also how to mitigate that. That's another thing, which is she used nanosulfur to do that. And okay. Yeah.
Excellent. Are there any other questions, comments, emotional outbursts? Anyone so excited to grow saffron now? Can't contain yourself? Excellent. Well, I really appreciate all of that great information. Thank you so much. In wrapping up, I have a few links for you all. I have course, would love your feedback. So there's a link here in the chat to an evaluation. We read every single one, and it helps make our programs better. Of course, now we're coming up to a little break. You're welcome to slip into another workshop. They're going on for a bit longer, and you can also check out our vendors in the vendor marketplace. We hope that you have spent a little bit of time checking out all of the interesting things in the auction. So here's another link to our auction if you'd like to go check that out. And of course, it's, we've got a whole another day and week of events. So, keep refreshing your program book so that you have all the most up-to-date links in your program book. And we will see you at the next one. So from everyone here at UMass, thanks for joining us and have a great day.